Happy Friday. Welcome to another episode of Murders, Mysteries, and More. My name is Kaylee.
And my name is Desi.
Be sure to like and subscribe. Don't forget to hit the bell next to the subscribe button to turn on post notifications. Before we get into this case, we always encourage those who have useful information to any unsolved case, please report it to your local police and sheriff department.
Before we get into this case, please be advised, this video is not recommended for those under 18 and will contain some very graphic details. If you do not feel comfortable listening, please click off now.
Today we will be discussing more Zodiac cases and who we think the Zodiac Killer is. If you haven't watched any of the previous Zodiac videos that we have made, please click in the description below before moving forward with this video.
Last video we talked about 4 different cases. First one was the tragic death of Sergeant Brian McDonald. McDonald coincidentally passed 2 days after the bombing of the San Francisco police station. Then we talked about Kathleen Johns, a pregnant woman who was having trouble with her car, when supposedly the Zodiac Killer assisted her with her car. When she couldn't get back on the road, he came back to give her a ride. However, he was acting very shady, and it was very unclear if it was an attempted abduction.
Then we also discussed Nurse Lass, which she worked for the Sahara Tahoe Casino and Hotel. Her logbook indicated that she last checked out from work at 1:50 a.m. However, the next day she did not make her shift. She is still missing to this day. And then the last case that we did was the death of Richard Ray Dittich, who was shot with a 33mm pistol while writing a parking ticket. The Zodiac did confess to shooting a man with a .38mm. However, again, wasn't 100% confirmed that was him.
On July 24th, the Zodiac sent a 5-page letter to the Chronicle, and in this letter he described torturing his victims, and he also quoted some stuff from the musical The Mikado by Gilbert and Sullivan. Some words he used were, P.S. I hope you have fun trying to figure out who I killed. And it was a very bold move to some people because of what he highlighted in the musical book. He highlighted some letters that contained the name Kim. Theoretically speaking, some people believe that the reason for this is because his name was possibly Kim. But Gareth Penn, who is a Zodiac researcher, discovered that when he placed a map over radiant angles in the Zodiac letter, he revealed 2 victims' locations.
October 5th, 1970, there was a Zodiac postcard message. The message read, Dear Editor, you'll hate me, but I've got to tell you, the pace isn't any slower. In fact, it's just one big 13th. And when he says one big 13th, he's basically referring to the 13th victim at that point. And then October 27th, 1970, so Paul Avery was sent a letter. And on this letter, so on it basically it says, it has boo, a skeleton, happy Halloween, and then it also has 14, 4-teen. So people think because he put 4-teen that it was describing a teenager victim. March 22nd, 1971, the Zodiac apparently claimed responsibility for Donna Loss's disappearance. He did send a letter. In this letter, it contained an advertisement for the Forest Pines condominiums and the text Sierra Club, sought victim 12, peek through the pines, past Lake Tahoe areas, and around the snow. So basically, we know Nurse Loss, she worked at the Lake Tahoe casino, and that's why many people think that he's correlated with her.
But back to October 27th, 1970, there was a possible correlation between Cheri Bates and the Zodiac letter that Paul Avery was sent. October 31st, 1966, an 18-year-old from Riverside, California College was found dead. The body was found at the campus driveway, and it was found around 8 o'clock in the morning. Their throat had been slashed, and their car was 100 yards from the scene. Officers had discovered that the wire from the distributor had been pulled, so therefore the engine in the car could not start. But the previous night, she was going to the library. Why did the killer decide to pull the wire from the distributor?
Well, obviously their intention was so that the engine couldn't start. maybe they thought that she was going to try to get away from them. And, she would have an advantage if her car worked. However, if they took this wire out and the engine wouldn't go, and it was outside late at night, then they would have the upper hand and be able to take full advantage of her. Possibly been in the library, and this killer could have probably went to her car, broke the window, and done this before she came out, and then when she came out, they decided to kill her.
Right. Very possible.
And then March 13, 1971, this was 5 months later, from whenever Avery got that letter, and he found a possible connection between that letter and the Zodiac Killer and Cheri Bates. So the Zodiac decided to send another letter to Avery. However, he credited the police for it, but not Avery. This is exactly the words that the Zodiac Killer said. Riverside activity, but they are only finding the easy ones. There are a hell of a lot more down there. So obviously he's meaning that there's even more people that have been killed out there. Cheri's case still, despite having a lot more evidence for the Zodiac being involved in it, it still technically remains open. And although, like I said, there seems to be a strong connection, even the Zodiac and his letters, still the police are not 100% going to confirm that it's related. Now, in this letter, also, the Zodiac Killer stated only information that the killer would know, that was not accessible about the public. And then there is still a $50,000 reward for her killer. So with all that being said, why do you think that the FBI/investigators is still hesitant to believe Cheri Jo Bates and the Zodiac are linked, even though in the letters it seems clear?
I think it's more so that they don't have actual as much forensic evidence as they'd like to. So that's why they're so hesitant to believe that the Zodiac Killer and Cheri Jo Bates are linked, because, the Zodiac has an ever-evolving count of bodies at this point, so she would just be a name to add to the list, which would probably fuel the Zodiac's narcissistic ego even more.
At least with the other ones, there was I know this is gonna sound bad, but they had blood trails and stuff like that, and partial fingerprints and whatnot. But with this one, there's no physical blood evidence or anything.
Yeah, so it's really hard to put the two cases together without some solid forensic evidence, unfortunately.
Yeah.
But in September of 1972, Arthur Lee Allen, who was a potential suspect at the time, was arrested for assaulting a 12-year-old boy. He only received 2 years of prison, which is basically a slap on the wrist.
Yeah, that's freaking ridiculous.
On January 29th of 1974, the Zodiac sent a letter after not sending anything for 3 years. He, in his letter, praised The Exorcist as the best satirical comedy that I had ever seen, which was from the Mikado musical. Why do you think the Zodiac Killer didn't send a letter for 3 years?
So, there's a few different reasons why the Zodiac Killer could have not sent a letter for 3 years. Is one, at this point of time, maybe the Zodiac was in the process of actually being convicted, and he's being suspected right at that moment and being questioned, then it would not be in his best favor to be sending more letters. Another aspect is that it could also be because maybe the Zodiac wanted a break from killing, who knows why. Maybe he just didn't have any inspiration at that point anymore, so he decided to wait. Or the third option is he just wanted to continue to throw off authorities. So here are authorities thinking, oh wow, we have not received a letter in 3 years. Well, I guess that's the end of the Zodiac Killer, just with Jack the Ripper. But then he went to send another letter because he's showing that he has advantage over the police.
And in his letter that he sent to, the press and all stuff, why do you think he praised The Exorcist?
So he probably praised it because, he quotes so much from the Mikado musical. He definitely, like, this book really inspires him, so he probably really likes the character from the book. Another aspect is he was just kind of, in a way, leaving a clue for the police, but the police are too dumb to realize, like, that there could be a connection there. And so, again, he wants to mock them.
True, you got a point there.
With all that being said, this gets us into, like, the suspects. So the first possible suspect, and this is a really big one, is Arthur Leigh Allen. So first of all, Arthur Leigh Allen was indeed at Riverside, California the weekend that Cheri Jo Bates was killed. So if the Zodiac was involved, well, there's Arthur Leigh Allen. If you guys remember victim Farron, Allen was only like minutes away, like he only lived minutes away. He also owned a Zodiac wristwatch. He lived in Vallejo, California, so it's pretty much close to all the victims' locations. November 1966, there was 2 typewritten letters anonymously sent to the police and news stations about Cheri Jo Bates, like we mentioned. And the typewriter that had to be used in there had to use elite or pick-a-type lettering. In 1991, Allen's home, they found a typewriter, and that's because basically he was convicted for assaulting a 12-year-old, so they obviously raided his house. And the typewriter coincidentally had elite and pick-a-type lettering, and like I said, he assaulted a 12-year-old little boy, and so he's sentenced for 2 years. So if you think about it, the Zodiac didn't send a letter for 3 years, so that in a way kind of like matches the timeline, maybe off by a year. Allen did eventually die from diabetes and a heart attack. Why do you think Allen had that specific type of typewriter?
I feel like, back in them days, a lot of people did have typewriters, but he may have decided this is like the typewriter that I'd like. It's got, like the type of lettering and everything that I like. I want it to be unique to me, so he decided, you know what, I'm gonna buy this typewriter.
Whether Allen is involved or not, I know you asked me this one question, but why do you think the Zodiac just stopped writing the letters in that 3-year period?
He could have been incarcerated. He could have had a life-changing event in his life that stopped him from killing again. He could have decided he wanted to stop killing for a while and just dropped off the face of the earth.
It's just like, bye.
Pretty much, yeah. He was like, psych, I'm out, bitches.
Joke's on you, you'll never find me.
Haha, fuck you.
And do you believe that Arthur Leigh Allen could be responsible for the Zodiac killings? And if you think so, why?
My personal reasonings, being that I've watched so many videos on this case and the theories and all that stuff, I think Arthur Allen, he does fit a lot of the descriptions pretty well. He did have motive. He was obviously very messed up in the head and a narcissist, especially because he assaulted a 12-year-old boy. He just, everything kind of feels like it fits very well as far as him being the Zodiac Killer. But also, at the same time, he also could not be the Zodiac Killer due to the fact that they only got a partial hint of evidence from his saliva on those letters.
Yeah, and something also to mention, we have mentioned before that typically what we knew was the Zodiac Killer was not sexually motivated. And Arthur obviously was. He assaulted a 12-year-old boy, so that's also another fact to consider.
But also, if you think about it, he could be sexually motivated towards younger, kids, but maybe more so, aggressive and angry and non-sexual towards adults.
True.
It could, his preference could be little boys versus adults, and he just went on a rampage. But in 1992, Robert Gray Smith wrote a book that was called The Zodiac, and he talked about how police had interviewed Allen many times. And in 2007, many police believed that Alan was the most plausible suspect. Dave Toshi, which he was a detective on the Zodiac case, his daughter actually talked about how her father felt the Zodiac was responsible but did not have enough evidence to prove it. Quoting from Dave Toshi himself, he said, "As soon as that guy walked in the door, I knew it was him." And there is a partial DNA evidence from a letter containing Alan's saliva, but even then, still, it didn't help connect the dots from him to these cases. If Alan didn't do this, why did a letter have a part of his DNA on it? Could he have been a copycat?
There's two different things. So Alan himself could have possibly just written the letters, and that's why you have the saliva on there and why he doesn't completely fit the description of who the Zodiac Killer is. He also totally could have been like a copycat because, I mean, there are people who get inspiration from serial killers all the time, and some of these like cases do have different MOs. So in a sense, like, there could have been the regular Zodiac Killer, and then all these other killings could have been copycats. So another suspect his name is Lawrence Kane. So Lawrence Kane coincidentally worked at the same hotel as Donna Laws. He served in the Naval Reserves, so obviously he was very intelligent, and he would have been able to know like the coding that was used in the ciphers. In 1962, Lawrence was in a car wreck which tragically damaged his brain. Obviously, if you have any sort of brain injury, it is going to change your personality. It's going to change the way you do stuff. It's very traumatic. So this could cause him to have a personality shift or cause him to think irrationally and go crazy. 1961, he was arrested for, this was before his accident, he was arrested for being a peeping Tom, so he did stalk people. And apparently, in one of the deciphers, it said like his name was in there. And then Kathleen Johns, the pregnant woman that was pretty much like abducted, when she went to the police station afterwards, they showed her photos, and there was a photo of Lawrence Kane. And when she saw that picture, she was like, yes, that's him, that's the Zodiac. If he is the Zodiac, do you think that his brain injury caused him to commit all these murders?
Yeah, definitely, especially if he lost like parts of his brain that controlled like his impulse and all that stuff. It could have caused him to commit all these murders with no control from him, of course. Brain injuries are very serious. A lot of times you do lose a lot of functions in your brain depending on how bad the brain injury is, and a lot of times people have seen where impulse control in the part of your brain is gone, so you do a lot of things that are irrational, wrong, and like you wouldn't normally do. One of our other suspects, though, was Earl Van Best Jr. The Most Dangerous Animal of All, written by Gary Stewart, claimed that his dad was the Zodiac. Earl Van Best resembles the infamous Sketch, and at the time he lived in California, had an interest in ciphers. He did like Gilbert and Sullivan, which the Zodiac Killer quotes a lot, and he knew a Satanist and raped Stewart's mother. The handwriting from the marriage certificate actually matched the Zodiac's handwriting, but the fingerprint did not match. And there was a mark that could have been a scar that was visible in Best and those found in Stein's cabs. But he died in 1984, and the classic look of the Zodiac is not uncommon for that time frame. Why did the handwriting match, but not the fingerprint? Could he still be guilty?
Could have like been a part of writing the letters for the Zodiac Killer. He could have maybe been an accomplice for an actual killer and written like all these letters. Also, like, that's the only handwriting that they do say that match, so they never really tried to really actively get him to try writing other stuff, because sometimes it can be easy to copy certain like handwriting. And like also the Zodiac Killer is very infamous, so, and like people have even said that like they went and forged and sent fake letters that was supposedly from the Zodiac, but it wasn't. So he could have just easily just pretty much just had like similar handwriting and forged it. He could still be guilty. There are a couple things to really take note in this. Like, he does match the look. It is a common look at that time, but he does really match the sketch. He also had an interest in the ciphers, and Zodiac uses ciphers. Also, him liking the Gilbert and Sullivan, their musical, and basically the Zodiac quoted that a lot. He was not the most sane person. He raped someone. He knew a satanist. Clearly, even if he wasn't the Zodiac Killer, this dude was crazy to begin with. So other possible theories, and there's even more than all of what we're gonna say, but there's Ross Sullivan or multiple killers, which is a theory I have. Ross made his co-worker uncomfortable, apparently. And then right after Cheri Jo Bates was found murdered, coincidentally, Sullivan disappeared. He had a similar haircut, same glasses as Zodiac. He had history of bipolar and schizophrenia, and having any sort of mental disorder, especially those two, you are not going to be in the right set of mind and you're going to do some crazy ass shit. And like we have mentioned before, that we did feel like the Zodiac Killer probably was mentally ill. He also did wear an army jacket, and he did have similar boots as the killer when the Berryessa couple was stabbed. The Zodiac Killer references the musical Mikado a lot, which basically that's referring, Ross Sullivan. So that's if he's involved. Now, this theory that I have is that the Zodiac could be more than one person. First of all, the amount of victims the Zodiac Killer has is a lot. That's a lot for one person. He claims to have killed at least 37 people, and only 7 are 100% linked together. So the fact that some other ones are not linked up makes me feel like it could be multiple people. And I feel like it's really hard to kill that many people and get away with that for such a long time. That just feels like a really impossible task. Also, multiple suspects we have mentioned have pieces that do match the Zodiac, but none of them fit 100% the Zodiac description. Also, referring to Paul Stein's murder, his murder was different. After the couple stabbings, he was obviously in the cab and he was shot with a gun. And he was by himself. And Kathleen, her thing was also different too. She's pregnant, her car stopped working, and it seemed more like it was an attempted abduction. None of the other cases are attempted abductions. Also, if you have multiple people, it's easier to clean up the mess. You would think after killing so many people that, it just it's hard to clean up that fast. After ever killing, it was cleaned up super fast. Also, if you have multiple people and not just one person, it's harder for the FBI, harder for the police department to catch who is guilty. Why did Sullivan disappear right after Bates' murder? He even made a co-worker uncomfortable.
He may have possibly disappeared after Bates' murder because he could have been guilty, very much so, or it could have just been coincidental timing that he decided to disappear. I think it is kind of weird that he made his coworker uncomfortable, especially for a man who couldn't, may not be guilty. That's just weird, but he could have done it.
Do you think that there is more than one person responsible for the Zodiac killings, and if so, why?
I feel like there's definitely a discrepancy between the fact that people think and the police that there's one killer, when my personal opinion, I feel like we started out with the original killer and then went to possibly a copycat, just because of the fact that the descriptions from the first couple cases versus the other cases
Or a
it's
lot
so
different.
all over the place. Like, one describes him as being like a tall, larky, fat man. The other one describes him as being like a good, like, high,
Army,
tall, skinny dude. Yeah, like,
yeah.
no. It's hard to believe. It's too many discrepancies, to be honest.
Yeah, and I could totally see, like, someone just getting, like, doing more copycats.
Yeah, no, I can see it. Actually, a lot of people do, especially crazy serial killer people. They do copy other serial killers. There
Yeah.
are so many copycats out there. It's not even funny.
And I think that's why the police were having a hard time solving it, because they were just so set on one person.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree on that. To be honest, they were definitely way too set on one person.
Right. Like, I could see maybe, Arthur Allen being the original suspect and then someone else.
I could see it too, to be honest. I really, from all the videos and like evidence that I've gone over, Arthur Lee Allen definitely seems like one of the suspects, and I feel like Lawrence Kane is a very good other suspect.
Yeah, definitely.
Like, they just, I don't know, everything just like mashes up together, and they seem to fit the
Well, and
descriptions
especially
as
with
well.
Lawrence Kane too, like him having those, like, the same type of boots and stuff.
It's too crazy for them not to eat it. But feel free in the comments below to write out your thoughts. We want to know what you think, who you think the Zodiac Killer may be, and if there is more than one killer. But with that being said, thank you for listening to another episode of Murders, Mysteries, and More. Remember to always keep your eyes open, because you never know when the Zodiac will strike again.